Hannah, you are not the only one who is muddling through today. Unfortunately, the President of the United States has been muddling through the whole global diplomacy thing over the last couple of days. He's also on the struggle bus. It all started this weekend when Biden gave a speech about the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine, and most of the speech was about what you'd expect, but then at the end, seemingly off script, he basically endorsed regime change against Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. Take a listen.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, for free people refused to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. We will have a different future, a brighter future, rooted in democracy and principle, hope and light, of decency and dignity, of freedom and possibilities. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
So, Hannah, is it just me, or is that, like, pretty dangerous for a president to just throw around like they're willy-nilly? Oh, by the way, we should depose this guy, maybe, who has nukes.
It's real chaos energy coming from this one, and honestly, I feel so bad for anybody who has to work in the Biden administration or anybody who worked in the Trump administration, because can you imagine trying to run after these two old bumbling crazy men and keep them under control and keep them from spouting off and starting a world war? Because I think it's a full-time job. And we see with how everyone reacted to him that, like, people were pretty aghast that he said this. He said it so casually, too, like, gotta get rid of him, he's gotta go. A lot of people who've been analyzing the foreign policy conflict going on in Ukraine and Russia right now have said that they really believe it's driven in part because Putin already fears that regime change has been the end goal of the West for some time against him. That's why he is acting in the manner that he's acting. I don't know that he's totally wrong on that, right? The U.S. loves some regime change, so do some of our allies. They've hated his guts for a long time for a good reason, but I don't think he's necessarily out of his right mind to think that regime change might be their goal. And now you have the sitting U.S. president basically saying this in a speech. I think it's very scary terrain, and I really think it's just, again, more proof of what you and I have been saying for years now, which is that old men should not be president. They're senile. They don't know what they're talking about. They're losing their capacities. I'm sorry. If that hurts your feelings, that is a reality. And people who are this old and this out of touch should not be able to put us in a position like he just did with these statements.
It's arguably elder abuse to make these old people try to have the most stressful job on the planet when they literally can barely remember what they had for breakfast.
And he looks like he's asleep half the time. Like he actually looks like he's actively falling asleep while he's speaking. It really does feel so sad that for us as this country, allegedly the greatest country in the world, we can't drum up anybody better than these old men who are like so out of touch and so removed from the day-to-day of American lives that they are casually throwing out things like regime change with a nuclear powerhouse.
Well, and the worst thing, too, is, one, I think the U.S. agitating for publicly calling for regime change against Russia is a bad idea, even though, like, to be clear, I think Putin's evil. And I think the Russian people would be much better served with different leadership. But that's not practical or safe for a president, a commander-in-chief to be saying. But if you are gonna say it, you should actually at least mean it. The White House, immediately after he said this, so it must not have been planned, it must have been off script, they immediately were trying to walk this back. A White House official immediately said he was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change. What? The president's point. This is a quote from a White House official. The president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors or the region. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change. He obviously was. You're walking it back, but don't gaslight us.
And this administration loves to gaslight the American people more than any I've ever seen. They are constantly like, no, that's not what really happened. That's not what we said. That's not what's really going on. I mean, over and over and over again, they use the same tactic, and I guess people fall for it, but he clearly did mean that. That is what he was talking about. We're not stupid, and they really ought to come out and say, you know, we're really sorry he made a mistake. This is not the foreign policy of this administration. But they all look pretty bad. Like I said, you've got a tough job if it's your job to keep up with this man's comms and PR, because he's a loose cannon. So is his vice president. You truly never know what they're going to say. Neither of them really seem to be very entrenched in the public policy decisions they're overseeing. And as a whole, I think it really projects American weakness. As you know, there's a lot of people And I agree with this, who talked about how Trump made us look bad on the world stage and how it made the rest of the world feel uneasy. And I do agree. But same is true of this administration, where they look crazy. They look untrustworthy. They're sporadic. They look totally unqualified and uneducated and uninformed. It's an embarrassment. And I think that it could actually really hurt us and put us in an unsafe position because of it.
Yeah, it's not the first time that Biden has gone out and said something, and then they're like, actually, that's not what he meant, and all the other people around him, whether it's the press secretary, Jen Psaki, or, for example, Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Take a listen to what he had to say. Right?
With regard to the president's incredibly powerful speech yesterday, I think the president, the White House, made the point last night that, quite simply, President Putin cannot be empowered to wage war or engage in aggression against Ukraine or anyone else. As you know, and as you've heard us say repeatedly, we do not have a strategy of regime change in Russia or anywhere else for that matter.
So it's like, who's really in charge here, folks? Because this is absolutely chaotic. This is mixed messaging. It's like all these adults in the room that are basically his handlers is the vibe I'm getting here. And they're saying, oh no, what the president said isn't actually the U.S. policy. Like, that is straight out of Veep. That's dysfunction squared.
But what I find funny about this is throughout the Biden administration, people have been asking who's really in charge, because I think everyone really understands that this man is not within his capacities to be able to actually do this role. And so there's always been a perception that there are others in the administration who are running things for him. For a while, people thought that was Kamala. I think people now realize she can't string two sentences together. I mean, literally her speeches are as bad as his. They make 0 sense half the time. But
she cackles.
I think this points. She cackles. She repeats things over and over. Did you hear her think about the passage of time last week? Yeah. It was so funny. She just kept talking about the importance of the passage of time and how much the passage of time means, and she kept repeating it over and over and over.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children.
What is this word salad, man? So
when you hit
I don't
the bong
think she's
too hard.
Right. But I think this actually points to a deeper problem that I actually do think is the case, which is, how much does any president actually have control of their administration or the foreign policy or larger decisions of the U.S.? And I think that to a very large extent, most presidents only do have a select amount of power. They have a lot of unelected bureaucrats and donors and very powerful players in D.C. who actually have a lot more weight than they do in certain circumstances. And to an extent, I think presidents act as the front man, but there's a lot of issues with this. I don't like to call it the deep state because that sounds conspiratorial, but there is a huge apparatus of unelected bureaucrats in DC that actually do call the shots, that never leave, which is one reason term limits wouldn't really be that great of an answer, because the real problem is these people who we have no say over, we don't even know who they are half the time, and they're able to continuously stay in DC, continue to entrench themselves and create more and more power for themselves, and increasingly have a lot of control over the decisions of various administrations. And that's one reason why I think the Tom Woods quote that says you vote and you vote and you vote and you just get John McCain is accurate, because the people who are largely actually in power permanently in DC policy, are John McCain. Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I actually thought when Trump called the deep state, I thought it was one of the more accurate things he said. Now, he took it to some conspiracy levels that weren't justified necessarily on those facts, but in general, the idea that there is this establishment of foreign policy and national security analysts and government employees and think tanks that doesn't really change its views from mainstream Democrat to mainstream Republican, and basically runs the town on foreign policy has a lot of truth to it. But to continue on with this odd saga, the most recent development is that now Biden has just today doubled down on this and said, I'm sort of walking it back, except I'm actually not. It was just an expression of moral outrage. Take a listen, Hannah.
Do you believe what you said, that Putin can't remain in power? Or do you now regret saying that because your government has been trying to walk that back? Did your words complicate matters?
Well, you asked 3 different questions. I'll answer them all. Number one, I'm not walking anything back. The fact of the matter is I was expressing the moral outrage I felt toward the way Putin is dealing and the actions of this man. Just brutality of half the children in Ukraine. I had just come from being with those families. And so, but I want to make it clear, I wasn't then, nor am I now, articulating a policy change. I was expressing the moral outrage that I feel, and I make no apologies for it.
So I'm confused. I don't understand what all's going on here, and I guess that means our military is confused, Putin is confused, and so this doesn't seem to me like a good way to run a country.
No, the one thing he did do successfully is equally confuse everybody and probably actually equally piss off everybody, because now half people want regime change and they're mad he's walking it back, and the other half do not want regime change or are mad that he's meddling in it. So as a whole, they just need to keep this man away from the hot mic. I think that's the best chance we've got here.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that even I didn't even mention this, guys. The cameras caught when he did this clarification that wasn't really a clarification that you just listened to. The cameras caught him holding a piece of paper that had in like bullet points for first graders, talking points for tough questions about regime change, and his exact answer was spelled out in like big font bullet points, and I'm like, This is really, really embarrassing.
It's so funny. I didn't see that. It was off Twitter most of yesterday, but that's actually really hilarious to me that they've got these like massive like show notes for him to follow. And he still can't even stay on script then. Like, you still don't know what he's going to do. He just totally goes off the teleprompter, off script, and says what he wants. So again, you know what? If you're on his comms team, I'll buy you a drink. How about that? Like, olive branch here from me to you. RIP your career, because you've got a tough 3 years ahead of you.
So anyway, we won't trouble you guys with that too much. Just know that, like, regime change, nah, who knows? That's currently the U.S. policy towards Russia, so hope no nukes come heading our way because of that confusion. I kid, they probably won't, but it's not a great path for us to be going down. You know what